is to just bring you up to speed as to where we are in the whole program, and yeah, share a little bit more background with you. And then we have Tim joining us today with a session, and then on the 24th we will have Lauren Walker, who is the head of data insights for EMEA, from Dan, someone who's, yeah, extraordinary. So let me share my screen, and you tell me if you can see it. As I mentioned last time we met, if you select on screen sharing options and you put gallery or side-by-side view, it is the best way to look at this, because then you'll be able to see the presentation and also us right on the side of it. So here we go. Let me know if you can see it. Can everybody see it? Yes. Great. Good. So here's the agenda for today, and let me know if you can see it with some voice, because I've lost the video now. I cannot see you. Can everybody see it okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes.
Yep.
Wonderful. So we are going to do a check-in, as always. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to just share a little bit more of a context on the program, where we are, what is the focus for this module. And then we also want to bring a little bit more depth into the process of the program, where it's about the what and the how. And then we go into Tim, and then we do exercises on pod groups, and then we check out. So we are checking in with this question today. What am I juggling right now? What is the thing that you're juggling the most at the moment? And this, if I could give you the lens of ideally with your clients. So what is that thing that you're juggling right now? And I'm going to stop sharing so that we can see each other. So what am I juggling right now? And we can go again, popcorn style.
I'm not sure what that means, but would you like me to go first?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I suppose it's quite a broad context in terms of what I'm juggling now, but I think if I were to try and summarize it, it's probably this idea of understanding how, as a business, we combine this broad strategic leadership with the multitude of high intensity disciplines that are popping up almost every day, and how we manage that and deliver a service that is kind of clear and simple for our clients still.
Yeah. Thank you. Who would like to go next?
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hello from Dubai.
Hi, Ramsey. We're checking in with what are you juggling right now as it relates to clients. That's our check-in for the moment.
Okay, so we're checking what with clients? Sorry, I didn't catch the...
So what are you juggling right now? What are you juggling at the moment?
Where we have a big pitch. So I handle emerging markets, and I'm responsible for all the relationships with all the scary countries like Pakistan, like Iran.
Wow.
And the Lower Gulf, which is Oman, Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain. And we have a big pitch in Dubai, which is the biggest recreational park, theme park in the region. It's called the Dubai Parks and Resorts. So that's what we're doing right now.
Thank you. That puts the things in perspective for me. Who's next?
I can share. I mean, I know I'm not from Dan, but I guess having spoken to you, that I do have some similar challenges with the range of clients that I deal with. And I think that Tim is probably going to cover some of this. But one of the challenges that I have is between spending time in developing my knowledge and expertise So through reading, research, content development, and also then delivery of work, because obviously the delivery of my work depends on my content knowledge and expertise, and then often the delivery, obviously because that's the business side of things, can take priority. So I need to try and find the balance between spending time on research, developing my knowledge, developing myself, and also making sure that I serve my clients really well as well.
Thank you.
I can jump in. It's Ed here. So there's probably two things at the moment. There's, from a client perspective, what does GDPR mean for them in Europe? And how does that affect us as an agency in our relationship with the publishers and the other businesses that we're working with? So that's a kind of a current issue. I think that a bigger one just for the for our agency is understanding what more our clients need from us and how they perceive us at the moment, as opposed to actually how we perceive ourselves and what we think they need. I think at the moment there's a knowledge gap there.
Thank you.
Right, it's Andrew here. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
So I think we have an interesting balance at the moment between trying to deliver incremental forms of revenue to the business. So be that through incremental services with our existing clients or new business, balanced against trying to keep our current clients happy in a increasingly complicated marketplace. And the amount of sort of firefighting and day-to-day urgent stuff that we have to deal with to keep our existing clients happy. And I think that's a very difficult balance to strike at the moment. And then you are in theory also supposed to be delivering longer term ambition plans for your clients as well. So that's a sort of potentially a third dimension.
Yep. So many balls up in the air.
Okay, it's Chayton here, and I think really just echoing Dale's point. Actually, I think in particularly in my role, which is I'd say more of a generalist role as a strategist, I think there's just managing the sheer complexity that clients are asking from us, and I don't think they actually know themselves what they want a lot, and it's it's kind of our job to kind of help them. But the the complexity and the deep specialization of certain disciplines is tough, but it's our job to obviously reduce all of that complexity and offer something fairly simple. And I think that requires a lot of learning on our side, but also recognition that we're not going to be experts in everything, and try to work our way through all of that. It's a lot of juggling, I think. Managing client needs, managing agency needs, managing expectations as well.
Those are the hardest to manage, because sometimes we don't even know what they're expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Who would like to share next?
Hi, I can go next. Actually, I think for me the biggest challenge or juggling at the moment is between different clients. So my team is doing analytics and consulting for 6 different clients at the moment, and they're across very different industries as well. So we have like finance, retail, and so on. So keeping the expertise and the knowledge about all these industries at the same time, and helping to answer the questions that my team might have, like the more strategic questions about the projects as well. So that's something that I have to keep on top of at the moment.
Thank you.
I can go next. I'm juggling like the client's expectations. We have a lot of clients that's not they're not used to buy creative work or media. So like they're juggling their expectations and their needs, and also like the profitability goals that we have. I think that's a hard part, always to be like helping the client and bringing them through the process in a profitable way.
Mm-hmm. Guiding them through the unknown in a way. Who else?
I can be next. I think.
Oh no, that's Oliver. Sorry.
Yes, it's Olivier. I see 3 different points. The first one is juggling with the finding the right balance between long-term strategy implementation and the short-term business demands, and especially juggling with all the different pitches. I have, for instance, 6 different pitches these days, and in the same time, a lot of clients and a lot of missions to deliver correctly. So it's of course very demanding, and I think another point is the fact that being juggling with in the same time chasing new business, integrating new methods, innovations, different kinds of evolutions, and in the same time having to deliver correctly to clients in an old fashioned way, for instance, as not everyone wants to work with innovative methods.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let's take a few more.
Yeah, Dan. So managing 2 things, managing the complexity of our business and managing the complexity of our clients' business. So navigating both of those things at the same time it's only a 2-ball juggling act, but it's pretty tricky at times.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. One last check-in so that we can move on to the rest of the session. Who would like to share? Who's holding something that could be a gift for the rest of us? All right, so let's move on to, and I'm working with 2 computers, that's why you see me looking this way. So I'm going to share my screen from here so that we can continue with the session and I can see you. So yeah, so if you go to view options and you do side by side, as I mentioned earlier, you can see the whole presentation plus the people. So let me just walk you through where we are so far, just for context, before we move on to Tim sharing his presentation with you. We are on point 3 here, leading clients into the future. We are on the 2-hour live session. We've had tasks that some of you have completed, some of you are still working on catching up, and hoping that we get your reflections, as we mentioned, within the pod groups this week. It would be super useful if you can, take the time to look on the site and see the reflection questions and then share it with others, because there's a lot of learning that can be drawn from that. So we will have 2 live sessions for this module. One is leading clients into the future, and the other one is co-creating with clients. Rather than saying client centricity, we're focusing on speaking about this as a co-creation and almost like a co-leadership in a way. There'll be some coaching that we will also do towards the middle of this module. And then we move on to the third part of the program, which is more about creativity and innovation. As I mentioned earlier, we have 2 igniters for this part of the program, which are going to be helping us understand more behavior, societal trends, and then how we explore data. So we have Tim, and then we also have Lauren Walker. Tim will be guiding us through this session today. And then Lauren Walker will come on April 24th, to speak about, tools that are already existing within the DAN network, how you can leverage that, and also give you a tool where you can measure where your clients are in this journey of using data and informed based solutions. So one last point before I hand it over to you, Tim, is that we as Hyper Island, the way that we develop programs, and this is something that we're bringing back today based on some feedback that we've heard from you. We've had one-on-one calls, we've had calls with your pod groups, but just to bring a little bit more clarity around the process of any Hyper Island learning experience. Most of the time, we only focus on number 1 and number 2 as any kind of learning experience, which is, each task has a beginning and an end that will result in a successful situation. What we want to focus on too in this program is, besides the content, also focus on the process. So how are things being done? How can you apply these learnings? How can you reflect, right? That's why we have so much reflection applied to our methodology, because it is part of learning by doing. Without that reflecting part, the learnings just kind of stay at the surface. And we want to make sure that we can dig deep into this so that the program is very applicable, even, long after the result and the success of, whether the content is successful or not. You can draw learnings from that. Do you guys have any questions on this before I move on to Tim, or any challenges that you see with this model? All right.
Hazel, I'd like to just comment on making sure that people make time for the next session, because having spoken to Laura now on a number of occasions in order to prepare, I'm super excited about that session too. And I don't know how many of you have watched the presentation that Nigel did on the global conference, but she's taking that to another level to actually translate that in a useful way, not only for us to get our head around within the DEN network on how the brands will collaborate together and how they reinforce them, but also plotting that against the digital and data maturity levels of clients. So going from, and also the, I would say, data evolution that we see. So she will bring that to life with real life pitches that she's been involved in as well. She will act as well on and bring to life the questions that she also experienced that clients are asking. And therefore it will be a very tangible session as well, where and therefore the session today will be in a very good preparation to then go into the very tangible application. So Tim, on that note, over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just actually going to really reinforce that I think it's really important that in some of the conversations, first of all, can everybody hear me? Okay, great. If there's any problems, please just let me know. So yeah, I think it's really important, some of the conversations that I had within some of the pods this week and last week, I think a lot of people quite naturally are asking about how do we apply this, tangibility to this. And I think that's going to be especially important in the next session. That's not to say there's not applicability in today, but also I think that one of the things that I really want to talk about with you guys today, and I heard it again in the check-in, is a lot of the time it's about how much are we looking at our own navel, how much are we looking at our own business, how much are we worrying about our day-to-day, about the things that we have to deal in the immediate, but also how much can we actually allow ourselves the time and see the value in actually getting outside of our bubbles and actually looking for inspiration, new material. And I think that's going to be probably one of the recurrent themes in this next sort of 20 minutes, half an hour of discussing with you guys, is just, if we're talking about leading clients into the future, I think one of the key themes for me is helping clients to get out of their bubble and helping clients to look outward at the bigger picture. And I think that in order for us to be able to do that, a lot of the time we need to be able to do that ourselves. So my provocations are really around those kind of themes for this next sort of 20 minutes. Hazel, could we start by showing the video here? We posted that on the website. I don't know whether everyone has been able to see it, but I think it's good just to set a little bit of context to today. This video, which is about 2 minutes, called Generation CX. Are we able to get that up and running, Hazel? Hazel, hi.
Yes, I'm about to share. 1 second.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I'm not sure how it's going to work here with me asking you to flip slides. I feel bad. I feel like I'm asking Alexa to do something.
You should. You can call me Alexa from now on.
No, it just feels like going into that sort of. There we go.
Why is it asking me for my password? That's weird. Okay, here we go. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
And there we go. Sorry.
Did you hear that?
Can you hear it?
That's the balance of power changing.
We're not hearing it anymore, Hazel.
Isn't it because you're muting, Hazel?
Did you hear that? That's the balance of power changing. We are your neighbors, your brothers and sisters, co-workers, kids, your grandmothers. We're the driver sitting at the red light next to you, the other passengers on the plane. And now we have the power. It used to be Madison Avenue, census data, focus groups, secret shoppers. It used to be jingles, endorsements, infomercials, coupons. It used to be the customer is always right, said those who didn't listen. But that was yesterday. Today we found our voice. We are strangers, but we are organized. We won't wait for your big data. We want whatever, whenever, wherever. 9 to 5. We live 24 hours a day. We are a moving target. We move fast. We are a movement. We are cutting cords, changing the way things work. Status quo, status no. We brought down the taxi industry, but we are not the enemy. We are your opportunity. We are growing, getting better at getting better. We are your path to success, if you can keep up with us. We'll be on the winning team because we'll pick the winners. We are not millennials. We are families with more Facebook followers than you. We are not baby boomers. We are grandmothers who order Christmas gifts from a touchscreen. Gen X. Gen Y? No. We are Generation CX. And you can be too if you listen to us. Create for us. Join us. Generation CX.
Thanks, Hazel. I just wanted to get that on to kick us off today. I don't know whether you guys have seen that before. I quite like it just as a sort of a little thought piece around the way things are shifting, the way power is shifting, the way that we think about our own relationships with end consumers, but also with our own clients. I know that the next session is going to be more specifically focused on this idea of collaboration, cooperation. But I think for me, I question whether at times we keep using this word centricity. Everything's become centric. So we talk about client centricity. We talk about human centricity. I work a lot around that area as well. And it feels to me at times as though it's become a little bit cliched. And I think that the idea of becoming more and more centric is actually something I want to challenge, because as I said before, it's almost about how much do we want to be centric and how much do we want to be always focusing on what the client says they want, and how much do we want to challenge that, push that back, and how much do we actually need to be looking a little bit further outside of the things that we're used to, the things that we know, and how can we bring new things into the relationship with clients. This next slide for me, I think it relates to something, another sort of, just to get us underway, a bigger shift that's happening. I don't know whether you guys have heard this theory much about sort of the glass box theory about branding. And it seems to make a lot of sense to me at this moment that, you know, traditionally in the past, we looked at brands as being sort of black boxes, that people like yourselves who were working in agencies, you were responsible for creating what that brand was. You were responsible for then trying to communicate that to the outside world. And we know that that doesn't exist anymore. And we know that we now live in a world of transparency. We live in a world of glass boxes. We can look at, I don't know how many examples from last year, from this year, whether it's United Airlines, whether it's the Weinstein Company, whether it's, you know, I look this week on my Guardian app on my telephone, and every day there's an article about how Google treats its employees. So the way that we think about employee relationships, the way we think about stakeholder relationships, client relationships, they all go to define what is the brand these days. So I think that it's kind of hard to separate out those elements anymore. Hazel, if you could, that's it, thanks. I think, you know, again, when we think about these sort of areas that we've been used to working in, so user experience, client experience, EX for me, I'm seeing this, you know, every week I'm seeing this more and more here in Brazil, and I think it's a global thing as well. Employee experience has become the new buzzword. And again, I just see it as, I think less and less there's those divisions. I think they're all interconnected. And I think that the way that we look at brands, and I think the way that we think about our relationships with our clients, again, has to kind of reflect the fact that there are none of these hard and fast borders anymore. All of these things are interconnected. And again, that's really where, for me, if we're trying to break down that idea of centricity, what do we actually need to think about in terms of just what do we bring to the table? How can we as leaders actually be challenging a little bit about those conversations that we have with clients? And how can we, as much as we need to understand their world, how much do we need to look outside of ourselves and bring in other experiences into the relationship? Next slide, Hazel, thanks. And I really want to focus the next sort of 15, 20 minutes, really looking at three areas. And they're sort of based around a lot of my experiences of working with different brands from the perspective of being an anthropologist. About 4 or 5 years ago, I picked up this book. Do you mind going back, Hazel? Sorry. About 4 or 5 years ago, I picked up this book, which it's from Tom Kelly of IDEO. IDEO, if anyone doesn't know, is sort of the biggest design thinking agency in the world. And it's called The 10 Faces of Innovation. And so Tom Kelly wrote this about anthropologists. Anthropologists share such distinguishing characteristics as curiosity and the wisdom to observe with a truly open mind, empathy, intuition, the ability to see things that have gone unnoticed. You know, I read this book and I was probably like the happiest anthropologist on the planet for about, probably for about 3 or 4 days. I kind of thought, wow, this is amazing. Look at these wonderful skills that I have. These are things that the robots can't do. I'm going to have a job for life. I'm going to be the last person when AI has taken over, that, you know, the anthropologist will be fine. And I think I felt that for about, like I said, about 3 days, 4 days. And then I kind of realized that actually this is kind of the biggest BS that I've ever read in my life. You know, this is not about anthropologists. This is something we all need to do. This is something that every one of you needs to do. I think everyone who's in a leadership role these days has to think about these three things: curiosity, observation, and empathy. And I think more and more, they're the things that I'm observing when I'm talking to other leaders, when I'm working with different clients for Hyper Island. these are the new muscles to me. These are things that we need to be training. These are part of this new mindset that we keep talking about, a more elastic mindset, a more flexible mindset. And I don't think these are the reserve of the anthropologist. I think I'm privileged in that I've worked a lot around these areas. I've received a lot of training, but the human being is a social animal. We are born with these, with this potential to be curious, to observe things, and to be empathetic. And I want to just go into those three areas, but I really think that my provocation for you guys today is just how much and where do you think you can help to try and develop some of those things and bring some of those skills to your clients on a day-to-day basis. And sorry, Hazel, yeah, there were just 3 photos just to show my credentials. I'm really an anthropologist, honestly, in case anyone's there thinking, yeah, you know, anyone can call themselves an anthropologist. So let's move on quickly. The first area I really wanted to talk about is curiosity.
I'm on a call, but it's fine. I'm on.
Why I kind of feel this is important at this moment in time. Hazel, if you can go on to the next slide. I think that one of the really interesting areas for me, and I'm going to leave within the inspiration and links area of our Slack group, a whole load of books, a whole load of references for you guys. One of the most interesting things I think I've read in the last few years, I don't know if you can see this book here, it's called Social Physics. It's by a guy from MIT called Alex Pentland. And it's kind of where anthropology meets big data. And I think it's building on a whole load of other theories, but really it kind of says that if we look at us as individuals, if we look at high-performing teams, if we look at cities which are the most economically advanced, there are really 2 things going on. One is we have this idea of exploitation, and the second, Hazel, is where we also need to have exploration. So if we look at how our brain develops as children, we need to feel comfort, we need to be exploited around the things that we're good at, and we need to be able to make the most out of things that we enjoy and that we're able to do. But at the same time, we also need to always be exploring. So within the book, Alex Pentland talks a lot about how within high-performing teams, go back. Within high-performing teams, what we really need is we need high frequency of contact within those teams, and we need energy. But at the same time, we always need new people coming into that relationship with new ideas and new thoughts. If we look at cities where there is a really high idea flow, then we need to have a high level of contact between people in the center, but we also constantly need new ideas coming in. And I think one of the provocations maybe for you guys is just about how much are we as leaders, how much are we listening to our clients, but how much are we challenging them? How easy is it for us to always be bringing in new ideas? There's actually an algorithm which is quite famous, which is called the explore-exploit algorithm. It goes back to gaming theory. If you look at slot machines, if you remember those kind of slot machines, the fruit machines, when the fruit goes round, there's whole levels of theory about when do you keep playing the machine and when do you stop playing the machine? And again, it's kind of about how long do you keep going with something before you look for something new? And there's also a lot of theory around us as individuals. And just a quick sort of word of warning is that when we are young, we explore a lot more. When we are young, we think that all the new information that we gather is going to be beneficial to us at some point in our lives. When we get older, we stop exploring as much. We tend to just stick with the things we know. Think about your friendship groups. Normally, you make a lot more friends when you're younger. Think about the restaurants in your neighborhood. When you're younger, when you first arrive in that neighborhood, you go and explore all the restaurants. And then as you get older, we tend to go less exploring. We tend to exploit. We stick with what we know. Okay, so it's a natural human trait. It's part of our DNA. But that's kind of worrying at this moment in time when we think about the social cultural forces that are going against us at the moment. And in particular, if we go to the next slide, which is really about, you know, this whole issue of filter bubbles. I don't want to go too much into the whole Facebook situation at the moment, but I think it's synonymous for me, of a bigger issue. I don't know if anyone knows this work from Eli Pariser, but about 5 or 6 years ago, he started writing about this problem of filter bubbles. So basically, you know, we are increasingly living within smaller and smaller points of reference. We tend to hear the same voices. Actually, there's a lot of study that shows that before the internet, we were getting into that phenomenon. If you look at, there's studies which look at the number and the amount of international news in the world's biggest newspapers. That had been falling before the internet, but we are increasingly more and more influenced by those things that are closest to us. So we talk a lot about collaboration and how it's important to get close to people, and we need to be close to our clients, but also we need to push ourselves at times. If we're going to actually give value to our client relationships, we need to push ourselves outside the bubble. We need to be looking for new sources of information. And we need also, I think, to be able to help our clients to be looking at references from increasingly from outside their own bubbles.
If I can just add something, Tim, because whenever I saw you, preparing for this session, and you were walking me through this, breaking the bubble and also exploring more than exploiting, you made me reflect on, here I am thinking, yes, I am preparing to lead my clients into new territories. But if I really take one step back and think, how much am I really preparing to help them also come out of their bubble? I feel like out of a 5, I would be on a 2.5 or 3. So I think that that's also something that, also to be aware of, like how much are we preparing to lead clients into a new world? It's almost like what we said at the beginning of the program, like putting on your mask first, but this time from a perspective of just having a more global lens, right, on everything that is happening. So just wanted to throw that reflection in there.
And I think really this to me also, it kind of connects a lot with this new sort of mindset that we're thinking about. I think Helga Nowotny that I put in here, she's a really interesting author around this theme of innovation. She's probably the most important person at the UN, the United Nations, around innovation. And she writes a lot about, how we need to be more comfortable with ambiguity, with uncertainty, but especially she writes a lot about serendipity, just the importance of serendipity in terms of being innovative. I know that it feels to me that like every day I'm being, more and more my clients are sort of charging me with the role of trying to help them to be more innovative. We know this importance of innovation. And to me, more and more that comes around trying to be serendipitous. And serendipity, if anyone's unaware of the theme or the word, really serendipity is just that possibility that we may discover things that we're not looking for. So that only really happens the wider we're actually looking outwards into new fields and trying to bring new ideas in. Does that happen? I put here 2 very simple examples. I don't know what it's like where you are in the world. I recently discovered in Brazil it's very dangerous to put these 2 things next to each other on one slide. And afterwards I kind of realized why. But Viagra and Velcro, just 2 great examples for me of innovations that, I'll let you guys make the connection. Viagra and Velcro, 2 great innovations that just came from serendipity. Nobody was looking to create Viagra. I don't know if you guys all know the story, how it was actually discovered and invented, that there was, Pfizer was trying out a treatment for heart problems. And then a lot of men started to notice a very obvious side effect down below. And Pfizer managed to turn that into this new product, which was Viagra. Velcro was the same thing. A botanist was out in the field looking for, it was actually collecting new plant species, and he realized that there was a specific plant that had this kind of hook, and he was finding it incredibly difficult to get it off of his clothes. And he realized that when he put 2 of those together, it was impossible almost to separate these 2 plants, the 2 leaves of the 2 plants. And so he took that, developed that, and started working on that to create now what is this multi-million product, which is Velcro. Very simple examples, but I think to me it's just worth reflecting on. If we're trying to be innovative, I think increasingly it's about how innovation traditionally has always come from just putting new things together, things that already exist. But if we're not already out there looking at all the new possibilities and all the new developments, it's less likely that we're going to be able to find new answers and new responses. Just lastly, on this point of serendipity, I think it's what really fascinates me at the moment is we're also seeing in the digital world this whole concept of what to me feels like the most strange thing to actually be able to do is about how do we design serendipity, which feels like an oxymoron. You can't design serendipity, but actually there's a lot of companies out there now which are even building on this. So Spark is a good example of like helping people to get out of their bubble, to find other people that may be of interest to them. So I think, again, it's almost my thinking about curiosity is just how much are we doing on a daily basis to push ourselves, to look beyond the immediate, to look at new references. I think that's also within our teams. How much do we encourage people within our teams to be coming back to us? You know, when was something I'm trying to do increasingly with some clients is just set up a 10-minute stand-up session within an office once a week, when everyone has to come in and just bring something new, something that they've gone outside, they've looked for, they've sourced, they've brought it back in.
And so, you do that with your clients or just with internal people from Hyper?
No, we do that with clients. So a lot of clients have sort of set that up themselves. So it's almost like a 10-minute, 15-minute stand-up at one point in the week. We started by going in and doing it with them, but then they've taken it on themselves. So it's just encouraging everyone just to bring new stuff in. Just what are you observing? What new sources have you found? What is the new podcast that you're listening to? What is the new book that was launched? You know, is everyone actually checking what's the most downloaded things on their on the Apple Store this week, or those kind of things? It's just some very simple steps to get everyone within the client to be looking a little bit further outside their immediate references.
Tim, can I just say something to your point on explore and exploit and serendipity? Because I think that serendipity for me is almost like 3 stages. The first stage is kind of making yourself open to the opportunity, open to the fact that there may be things out there that you don't know, which are kind of the explore. And then when that opportunity hits you, recognizing that it's an opportunity, because we're seeing things all the time. And being observant enough, which is probably your next point, observant enough and aware enough that that's an opportunity or something that we can use, like those 2 examples of the Viagra and the Velcro, and then actually exploiting it and turning it into something. So those explore and exploit are so well connected. As I say, the 3-stage, making ourselves open, seeing the opportunity, recognizing that it's an opportunity, and then doing something with it.
Fantastic. Absolutely. And I think that's where it comes into the second point, Alison, around really observation. And that's really linking that back into human behavior and just how much are we actually observing on behalf of our clients, and how much we're actually encouraging our clients also just to get out there and to be looking at what people are doing about real behavior. I think I'd rather leave some links in here. I know that in some of the pod discussions, we've had some interesting conversations. It seems that the whole area of behavioral psychology, behavioral economics is something that's increasingly important. It's something that fascinates me. But just in general, just about, you know, real human behavior. What are human beings really like? I don't know if you've seen this image here, but I can't help thinking about real human beings and real human behavior without seeing this. I do tend to look at the world as though 99% of human beings, and probably 100% of all men, have a little bit of Homer Simpson within them. I think that, you know, we live in a world where we have to make, the latest statistic I saw was 10,000 decisions a day. So we tend to be making decisions, what we call in English gut decisions, that we then try and post-rationalize. So we're using the fast brain a lot more than the slow brain, the considered brain. So we tend to look for those shortcuts. We tend to want to try and find how can we hack systems. And I think, you know, when I look at this image here, I guess in English we call it a shortcut. I have to apologize that in anthropology it has we have another name for this, which is, you know, anthropologists are pain in the ass. Sorry, we call this a desire path. This is, you know, sort of, to me, this is the desire. This is a better way of thinking about human beings and what human beings are actually looking to do. But also, I think increasingly, again, if I'm thinking about linking opportunities that we may have thought around in that explore-exploit dynamic into how we turn that into real opportunities via observation, I think increasingly in the digital world, if we look at the next slide, Hazel, it's kind of about understanding this phenomenon here, which is, you know, on the left-hand side, it's our user experience, and on the right-hand side here is more the design. I hope this kind of makes sense to you, that we tend to spend a lot more time, from my experience working with different clients, really thinking a lot more about design really worried about design, really trying to do the best design possible. We see our job traditionally within agencies has been helping clients to think about design, creating the best possible prototype, creating the best possible product. And then we tend to spend a lot less time actually thinking about what's the user experience. There's been a lot of research which has been done, which actually shows that if we want to change users' behavior, our product has to be 10 times better than what existed before. Sorry, 9 times better. That's why Google has this whole Google X, which is all their moonshots. They use the idea of Google X because they know their things have to be 10 times better rather than just 9 times better. I think, to me, what's interesting about looking at this image here also is, I'm not saying that one is right and the other is wrong. I think that the secret today in a digital world is how do we help clients to understand, how do we decrease the gap between the UX and the design element? How do we create prototypes more quickly? How do we launch to learn? And I think actually one of the interesting examples for this these days is actually from this image here, the parks around the world. So I don't know if any of you know any architects around the world, but most of the major architects now who design parks, they do not do design. They actually will leave the grass for about 6 months to a year, and then they will look at where people are walking. They may use drones or they use some way. I recently met an architect here in Sao Paulo who showed me how he does this with drones. They will actually look at where people are walking, and then they will pave the desire. Okay, and I think that's very much a mindset that's immediately obvious in most startups these days, especially if you look at the fintechs. They've almost, they're almost born with this concept of just pave the desire, really launch as quickly as possible, so we can look at how we're constantly adjusting design, so that we're always able to work with our with what users are really doing and what users really need.
And if I can just add one thing to the left part of this would be what data would give us, right? So this is something that in 2 weeks when Lauren comes on board, she will share, okay, what are the tools that you guys already have internally as a network to be able to uncover what this, what do you call it? The
desire path.
The desire path, yes.
Yeah, and I think, I saw a lecture recently, one of the heads of Fjord design agency actually spoke about that. That's why he said that in this world now, this desire path in the world of data is actually a lot more disruptive, because as soon as we're testing, we're gathering data, and that allows us to actually know what people are doing and what they, and so we can actually build on that and actually be making the design far more linked into the desire path. So I hope that makes sense. And really just linking that back into what Alison said, I think just all the time about observation. If we're not actually constantly questioning what users are doing, and again, sorry to throw another statistic at you, but something I was reading recently was just that between 40 and 50% of startups fail because they haven't really identified the problem they're trying to resolve. And I think a lot of the time our clients also kind of forget that. What exactly is that need that we're resolving? What is that friction point? What is the thing that we're actually trying to help people to achieve? And so if we're not focused enough on that, if we're not actually observing that, if we're not feeling that pain ourselves, most of the time we forget that we're not the users, then our clients can lose sight of that. So I think, again, that's how we can link in the curiosity with actually the observation and trying to do it ourselves. So the third element of this is empathy. I think I spent a lot of my time really trying to understand what is empathy. I think that, again, I can put some links into you guys, some really great content around empathy these days. I think there's a lot of theories around we're losing empathy as human beings. I don't think it's as simple as that. I think we're in a moment of new empathy. I think technology creates new ways to connect with people, just as it creates new ways to actually create barriers to the way that we have empathy with people. I think that around our clients, I think what happens a lot of the time is, and that's where we are actually going to do an activity around this, it's actually thinking a little bit more about the way that we listen. But I just wanted to share a quick story first with you guys, which to me really kind of sums up this whole sort of thing around empathy. So Hazel, is it possible to go to that rather strange looking boy? There we go. That strange looking boy who happens to be my son. I want to share with you a fail. I want to share with you a big fail on my part. So I'm the anthropologist. Supposedly I can do the curiosity, the observation, the empathy. What happened was about a year ago, Theo, this is Theo, at his school, the school, I don't know about what part of the world you're in, but here in Brazil, his school, they have a design thinking week. So yeah, our kids are doing design thinking now. They had to design a new technology. So Theo's group, they created this thing called an interactive TV. So they worked on it for a week in their groups. They went out and they researched with the other kids in the school. And on Saturday morning, they did a presentation to all the parents. So Theo's group, they did their elevator pitch. They didn't call it an elevator pitch, but that's kind of what it was for their product they created, this interactive TV. And basically, it was a TV that you could operate by voice. So you would just tell the TV what you wanted it to do. So it would be record Cartoon Network. For most of them, that was the most important thing. Dad wants to watch the City match. What time's that on? Please go over onto Netflix and record this. Or can you get something up on the screen? So they did the presentation, and at the end, all of the parents stood up and applauded. They thought this was absolutely fantastic. Only there was one parent who was sat down, who didn't think it was that impressive. Sorry, that was me. All the parents were looking at me like, you didn't think this was amazing? And I sort of said to them, well, it's okay. But, they're 6 years old. They get better. Give them time. It's not bad as a first sort of prototype. It's okay. And then I sort of explained to them, actually, I'm sorry, but about 4 or 5 years ago, I did a project with Samsung as a client, and we actually developed this product. I wish Theo had told me, but we developed this product that was a TV that you would interact with, and it failed. It just wasn't a success. We couldn't really develop it, and sales were not good, so it got dropped. So you can imagine when I explained that, then the parents looked at me like, this guy is even worse. I mean, he's killing our kids' dreams, and he's even got a reason for it as well. As we were leaving the room, I then saw this. If you can see in the bottom of the picture, there was this other little screen here at the bottom. And I asked Theo, I didn't really understand that part of it. What is it? And that's why Theo is doing this in the photo. So he said to me, Dad, actually at our school, there's quite a lot of kids who are deaf. It's one of the main schools in Sao Paulo where we have a lot of deaf kids. So when we actually went out and tested with them, and we worked with them and listened to them, we realized that they can't operate the TV because their voices are different. So we needed to create something else within the system for these kids. So actually the TV could be operated by hand signals, by doing sign language. So that's why Theo in the picture is doing the sign language for Minions. So I don't know if you can sort of imagine, how did I feel at that point? Like the worst parent, the worst anthropologist. My son was doing everything that I should do in terms of going out, really applying a bit of observation, empathy, trying to understand people's behaviors. And actually, I then subsequently, I called my client at Samsung that I worked on with the project. And he told me that actually Samsung had then created a television set that could be activated by sensors. And it was like the most successful product they created in the last 2 years. And as he quite rightly asked, why were we employing you and not your son for 3 or 4 years ago? What did I really learn from that? I went away afterwards. I stopped and thought about it, reflected on it quite a bit. And I realized from looking at quite a lot of research that 6 or 7 years old is when we most apply curiosity, observation, and empathy. It's when we ask those stupid questions. We don't have the ego. We don't kill ideas. We tend to just listen to people in a more open way. And I think that's one of the things that I increasingly see. How much of our time do we spend thinking, I've seen that before, it won't work. But we know that the world changes every day. Technology changes every day. Just because you're an expert in a technology yesterday, you will not be an expert tomorrow. We're always going to be newbies in this new world. And that's why we need that more flexible mindset. The other thing around this is just, again, going back to the explore, exploit. 6 and 7 year olds are out exploring new things, bringing new things back to their friendship groups, a lot more than we are when we get into our 30s and our 40s. And sorry, I know some of you maybe still in your 20s. But, you know, that's, again, it's why I think we need to have a bit of that childish mindset at times. And the other thing about that to me is just, we actually only really go out and explore the world if we're optimistic. And sometimes I feel that we get so dragged into a space with clients at times that we find it hard to be optimistic. And I keep thinking a lot about the work that I do, maybe more around helping use design thinking with leaders to bring about business transformation. Is one of the key things I keep finding that most engages them is getting them to think about optimism and the importance of optimism. You know, in design thinking, we think a lot about problem spaces and solution spaces. We only really think about solution spaces and imagining a better future and how we can work better if we're optimistic. So I'm not the eternal optimist, but I do think a lot of the time we need to bring a level of optimism to our relationships with clients to actually help them to use imagination and to think about new possibilities. I want to finish really just with building on that around empathy and around listening. And that was something I realized when I sort of discussed with Theo. How had they sort of discovered this about the kids in the school that were deaf, and how had they actually sort of interviewed them and worked with them? And it made me sort of go a little bit deeper into trying to understand, how do we listen, and, you know, what is listening? And I'm always kind of shocked about how many people I know and how many of my friends and how many of my clients work in the area of communications, but actually they've never been exposed to this idea that really there's kind of two theories around listening. So one is what we call dialectic listening, and one is what we call dialogic listening. To me, they're really important because I think that we tend to spend sort of 95% and maybe 99% of our business lives, a lot of our personal lives as well, in the dialectic mode. The dialectic conversational mode is really when we're trying to resolve something specifically. So we go into a conversation listening for things that we want to hear to help us to resolve a situation. How many times do you go into a client meeting when you're already in your head kind of thinking about the response? How many times are you already starting to formulate within your own mind that response? Because we want to get out of that meeting quickly, we want to have something resolved. And so that's really the dialectic mode. It's based on synthesis, it's based on reaching a consensus. The dialogic mode of conversation and the dialogic mode of listening is almost, it's almost where, to me, empathy really does come in. I'm not listening to you, I'm not in a conversation with you because I want to resolve something specific. I'm actually just listening to you because I want to look at the world from your perspective. I'm not in the back of my mind trying to resolve a problem here. I actually just need to understand you as an individual, you as a client, or you as a consumer. And I think that those kind of conversations, maybe the best way to describe it is, you know, when you sit on an airplane or on a train, you're with that person for maybe 1 hour, 2 hours. You're never going to see them again, probably. But that's when we start to actually play around with our language a bit more. Our language is more in the subjunctive, about using questions that actually help people to express themselves better. We play with the language when we talk to people, when we listen to people, but we're not trying to resolve something. And I think from my own perspective as well, a lot of the time, that's when that really important insight comes from. A lot of the time, those micro observations, those little things that actually really help a client come when I'm not there with my agenda is everything. And actually, I'm just trying to listen to you. I just brought one very quick example to finish the session before you do the activity, something very real that happened last year on a project I was working with for Hyper Island with Bayer. I don't know if everyone knows the German pharmaceutical company. So we did a project with their crop science division. So Hazel, I don't know if it's possible to show that photo there. So we did some work where we took the client out to meet with some farmers here in Brazil. These were coffee farmers. And the client was not obsessed, but the client was very much focused on how do we, obviously their first point is how do I sell more product? basically their route into selling more product, if you go to the one before, Hazel, sorry, was what is my existing relationship to my client? So very much wanting to listen to the farmer about, what is his existing relationship with my products? I would say that's very much about exploitation mode, and the listening that was going on was very much about dialogic listening. I asked them just to stop, and I asked them I asked this guy here in the picture, the farmer, just tell me a little bit more about, what's going on here in your life. Just let me try and understand you a little bit more. After about 20 minutes, the guy told us this thing about how the farm had been in his family for 3 generations. And the one thing he regretted was that nobody in all that time, and him working on this piece of land for 20 years, he had never once met a consumer of his product. He did not know who were the hipsters in Sao Paulo that were buying his coffee. It was only when we allowed that to come out by really listening in the dialogic way that we realized that was something important. That was an unmet need. That was an opportunity. The client walked away from that saying, great, actually, here's an opportunity to create a platform to connect the hipster in the city who wants to learn more about his product with the farmer who has the same need. And then within about 4 or 5 months, Hazel, the next photo, actually, that was turned into a platform, which is now live here in Brazil, which buyer is not making a whole load of money off of at the moment, but they're getting a whole load of data from both the users and from the farmers themselves. So I think that maybe links in a little bit to what's going to come up next week about data ecosystems. But again, observing those opportunities, I think, comes from listening in the right way and not being so obsessed with listening to what we want to hear, but actually opening ourselves up to listen properly through empathy, to having that observation, to really seeing where opportunities could be. And just wrapping up here for me, I think, again, it's just about to what extent do we need to actually be helping our clients to question what they think are the problems they're facing, and how much can we really force them out of their bubble. And as I started off by saying, I think that for me only comes by if we're doing it ourselves and if we're pushing ourselves every day to really train those muscles. It's like going to the gym. If you go to the gym in January, you go for a week or 2 weeks, you work really hard for 2 weeks. The impact for that next 2 weeks is probably great, but for the rest of the year, it's not so great. So I just think, what are those little things that you can be doing every day that helps you to get a little bit outside of your bubble, that helps you to bring a little bit more empathy, curiosity, and observation into the relationships that you have with clients?
Thank you, Tim. And Caroline, I saw your suggestion, your dare to the team to maybe go out and post some photos of things they observe as it relates to your clients' customers. I love that idea. Because, to your point, Tim, the more we practice, the more we'll be able to lead from the space. And so what we want to do now is actually do an exercise around active listening, which is one of the best gifts I was ever given as a leader as well. Because I remember, being that kind of, my boss used to say that I had the Chihuahua complex, because I'm so short and the loud one in the room, waiting to say something, because I thought that that's what it meant to be smart, right? I thought that having the answers is what it meant to be a leader. And then I realized that it had to do with really listening, with intention and with attention. So I would love for us to now go into an exercise. It'll be first individually, and then you go into groups and practice this active listening. We'll guide you through it. But for this first part of the exercise, just take a moment to think about 3 challenges you're facing as you're leading clients. A good way to come up with these is, what are those questions your clients are asking you that you feel you don't have the right answer to yet? Any questions so far as to what you need to do for about 3 minutes? All right. Does everybody have it? Or do you need a few more minutes or seconds? Not minutes. Can I see a thumbs up if you have it? Great. So what we will do now is that I'm going to send you into groups. For those of you who are here for the first time, this technology allows for us to send you into breakout rooms and do exercises in smaller teams so that you can get a lot more insights that way and also connect, because part of this program is also to build networks within the participants of the program. So the idea is that, let's say one of the biggest challenges I faced with one of my clients is that, you know, we're not connecting well, or we're not able to move as fast as possible. How can you help us move faster? Think in a more, you know, think fast and fail way. So that's something that my clients ask me a lot as from the job that I have at Hyper Island. What the rest of the group would do in this breakout room is to then listen, as Tim was saying, you know, with attention and ask questions with intention. So how can you help me explore beyond what I already know? So what is this challenge that I'm facing? So Tim, could you ask me a question, just as an example based on that? Like I'm going to share with you that my client, you know, they really struggle with understanding how to move faster. What would you ask me in order to show me empathy and to work with me through this challenge that I face?
Okay. Maybe I'd like to know from you a little bit more. How do you feel when that comes up as an issue, as something that we discuss? How do you feel when we have those discussions around that?
I feel two things. So one is the imposter syndrome, right? Because what the heck do I know? I'm also learning as I go. And then second, I feel, you know, maybe it is a little selfish in a way, but I could also feel that, I don't know, it might be too late for an old organization to be thinking of this just now, right? So those are two feelings that come to mind, for example.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit more about with other clients? Do you feel something similar? Are you hearing that from other people?
Yeah, I hear from other people, but I think especially with this particular client, I feel this because there's a lot of resistance in their culture and it shows up. So I'm thinking, how are you going to move fast if you know, your culture is living in such an obsolete way?
Maybe could you tell me an example of how
good.
help those up?
So we'll pause there, but that's just an example of like how you can ask questions to help the other person explore deeper. Okay. So the way that we'll go into this is you'll have you know, 3 to 4 people in your group. Each of you will share a challenge, and then the rest of you will ask questions and listen with attention. What you really want to get at is to try to practice from a place of empathy. So this exercise really is more about what you listen, what you see also, and what their expressions when they're sharing this challenge, rather than what you need to say. So it's more about asking questions and guiding and maybe saying, yeah, I can relate to how you feel. Does that make sense? Are there any questions before I send you into groups? And I'll paste on Slack the instructions so you have them there. Sounds good? Yeah, thumbs up? All right, here you go, magic. Jorge, oh, there you go. And Nicolas.
Nicolaj is in, right?
Yeah, I put him in a group.
Great. No, he sent me a message earlier about just was having some problems getting in. So
yes, but
no, he's here.
I had a, yeah, here exactly. I had the wrong link to the Zoom.
Okay, I'm sending you now.
Was one there from the point of view that actually you were genuinely interested.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective in the conversation, I felt valued, whether it was identifying, unpacking the issue or not, I don't know. But
it felt quite a natural conversation in that way, offering solutions to find new paths. So I think it was right, unless Hazel said some otherwise.
Well, I wasn't there, so I rely more on you, Laura.
We defend Nina.
I actually think my take on it was that you were, when we kind of broke after 5 minutes to say, where do we go with this? Is the result that I should come to a solution? You were actually the person who led and said, no, I think we should be doing this. So I think actually you were the opposite in asking questions. I think we kind of got to the point though where it felt like a kind of revolving therapy session.
It did, yeah.
Where you're kind of saying, how do you feel? What do you think about that? And it's just, for me, there was a slight frustration where I was like, yeah, well, I don't want to give you the answer, but I want to lead you to the answer, if you know, and maybe that's wrong. And that's kind of where I got a little bit stuck.
Yeah.
And do you know why? Do you know what happened there to you? Why did you feel that inclination to?
Because we weren't allowed to.
Because I'm a British. Yeah, because I'm a Chihuahua as well.
Oh, the Chihuahua complex.
I don't. Yeah. It just felt like we were going around in circles. Not on everybody, by the way, but just maybe that was when it was me because I was the one being asked the questions. Yeah.
Right. So that you felt that when it was you. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Who else wants to share?
I can share.
Go ahead, Ramsey.
Okay, so we talked about how we can enable discovery with our clients, and Olivier gave us an example of how sometimes briefs are getting thinner rather than thicker when it comes to clients trying to map out where they want to go in the future. And I think it's part of the big changes that are happening in our world when it comes to digital and how we approach data, even when it comes to how we approach insights, because that is all, if you're working within Dan, you're seeing those changes from CCS to M1, and that's going to affect how we approach clients with a story. And that story still isn't written in its entirety for the whole organization. It's working in bits and pieces. And I think what we've seen when we talk to Dan and when I talk to Olivier is that each country needs to approach the story differently. It's not just one painting. The objective is, at the end of it, is a digital economy 100%. But how we get there is still a story that you have to build with your clients, and you have to sometimes hold their hand while you discover a new solution that is sometimes not easy for them to take. Don't forget, we're working with marketeers that are basing their knowledge on the last 10 years of how marketing is done. And it's a bit of a challenge for them to let go and trust you with a totally new digital solution to run a campaign. So I think that's one of the challenges that we face here, which is, we're evolving into a digital economy. 50% of our revenue comes from programmatic. But how do we take clients there is a discovery, and it's based on individual stories that you write for your country, for your company, with your clients, because you can't rely just on one big story that's not written in full yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how do you guide them without telling them what to do exactly, right?
Yeah, and I think just connecting with that, Ramsey, I don't know, I think that really connects with me, that image I showed of the desire path, the design versus the UX is working together and, learning together. And traditionally, maybe you were the designer for them, but now you're kind of co-creating with them. So it's about testing things quickly, and that's a new mindset. That's a completely different way of working with them. So to me, there's an obvious link just in looking at that situation with doing less of the design and actually being more going through the experience with them. So you as leaders are kind of suffering with them at the same time, rather than you being responsible for coming up with a design that they may then look at and think great, or equally they may look at it and think, no, that's not the way it is.
Anyone else?
Did everyone in the groups feel that they got to, you know, did they feel that they evolved the challenge? Because although I wanted to jump in, it got me thinking about different areas. I mean, I suppose that would be the question.
Not everybody at once.
Yeah.
I think the challenge in the situation is that for many of us, our success and where we've got to is predicated on being action orientated and delivering solutions. So the switch of becoming listeners and the focus on empathy can feel challenging, especially when you're dealing with clients, and the pressure on us as client leaders is to give those clients solutions for their business. And so it can feel that there is a kind of a friction between the empathy versus being goal orientated. And I think often with time pressures on as well, it is you tend to focus on, I have an agenda going into talking to a client that I want to make sure I land something, whereas the reality is you will get a lot more from flipping it and going after empathy. Or as one of my bosses has encouraged us to do as a team, is to have unstructured conversations with clients. So rather, we all have status meetings with clients where we have a list of 10, 12 things that we want to get through. We are now actively encourage our teams to have status meetings with clients that don't have an agenda. And just asking the client, what's important for you this week? What can I help you with? And then trying to unpack that. And often you get more out of those conversations than you do from going through your list of 10 things. But again, it can feel very strange to, I remember telling an account director in my team to do it, and his literal response was, but what do we do about the status report? And for us as a business, I think we should be focusing more on talking to clients rather than getting through a list of preset questions that we have.
Yeah, and to your point, sometimes going at it like that is investing time earlier, right? And then it might feel to some people like you're wasting time, but in reality, you're investing in what's going to come out of it next. Because if you just start a meeting by asking that question, what can I help you with this week? You open up possibilities of maybe upselling to them, right? A pitch that is not even something that is on the works.
Yeah, absolutely. It creates opportunities. And if we talk about serendipity, that unstructuredness, like we see it with clients all the time, that the best conversations you have are when you bump into them in their canteen when you're there seeing someone else, or when you talk to them in the corridor for 5 minutes after the meeting and they say, oh, have you caught up with such and such? And it's thinking about how do we create that unstructure? How do you create unstructured situations where you can get to you can peel back some of the layers to get closer to a truth, which is what's important to that client, rather than having a very literal agenda for you to get through.
We I know it might be going off topic, but just really quickly, we tried something slightly differently recently, where we had a roundtable event with 5 clients that we obviously don't clash, but we're quite senior, and we kind of posed 2 themes, but customer obsession and the 4th industrial revolution, but we didn't put any agenda, and we purposely kept quiet. We had a director kind of man marking each client and kept quiet to let them talk between themselves, and actually the actions off the back of that were kind of, well, my challenge was short-termism, so that actually allowed us to be a bit more future-facing on what client challenges were, rather than have a formal environment where we just present at them, I suppose was the point. We did it in the afternoon and then we went to dinner.
And Peter, were they immediately open to that concept?
Yeah, that's what I was worried about. So I actually had 40 slides in my back pocket on a laptop in case they didn't start talking. But they did, and they were really engaged. And it was kind of a win-win then, because not only were they talking, but we were picking off opportunities that we can help with, kind of without it saying a word.
Yeah.
And were they the type of people? Sorry. Were they the type of people that you would expect it to be open-minded in getting into? Because if I think a little bit on the exploitation, people with lots of results orientation, calls orientation, what Dan said, versus the ones that are more open-minded and maybe thinking, well, a little bit more.
It's 50-50. So we purposely we picked 2 pure plays, and we picked 2 traditional clients. And actually, one of the more traditional clients really was leaning in. The other one was less so. But it was interesting.
The beauty of where I sit, or where we sit at Hyper, is that our clients are also marketeers. And the thing that they tell us the most is, I wish my agency would ask me more questions, because I know they are just as lost as we are. So that's just like a little, nugget from the other side, if you will.
Not us.
Not us. So so we're coming up.
Actually, Hazel, can I just jump in and point?
Of course.
I actually think that as an agency, we often go into the room as set up as being the experts, and I think that, again, when you're trying to create empathy with a client, creates a hurdle, because it immediately puts a barrier between you and the client. The client's afraid of getting the acronym wrong, or not understanding the ins and outs of GDPR, whereas obviously we all do on the agency side. And I think one of the things that we need to be more conscious of, or play smarter, is to create empathy by sharing those challenges, and by saying, look, we don't know all the answers. We've got better access to those answers, but it's very difficult to create empathy with somebody if that person thinks you're not sharing their pains and frustrations. So one of the things that I think we need to be more cognizant of is, or at least saying to clients, is that we have the same issues within our business as you do. Here's what we're learning. How can that help you? And trying to bridge some of those gaps. Yeah. Certainly that it creates, and our immediate response is kind of like Caroline's, which is like, we are the experts. What are you talking about? We get it. Whereas obviously sometimes, very occasionally, we don't, but we need to go into the room with a client, virtual or not, and help them feel at ease by pointing out that we're not always the savants that we make ourselves out to be.
What was really interesting about the roundtable was, obviously we predetermined the themes based on the fact that we thought we could speak quite eloquently about them. The day before, Cambridge Analytica broke. So as soon as we got in the room, everyone wanted to talk about that and our opinion on that. And obviously, 1, I didn't have the answer. 2, I didn't know if I could even talk about it. So that was really interesting, because it did exactly that. We all came to a collaborative conclusion, which was good for me, because it meant that no one could sue us. But equally, it was really useful, because we all came to a collaborative solution. But I didn't plan that. It just kind of happened.
Yeah. And interestingly, that's why the next session is called Co-Creating with Clients.
Mm-hmm.
This is what Lauren will also bring up, actually, how we now think to be very assertive, going to clients and saying we don't know it all, but we need to work together. And of course, she will bring that in specifically as well to highlight that we have the CRMs of CRMs. Yeah, please hold that thought, because today you might have felt a little bit of the session being an exploration. Next week it will feel like exploitation. But hopefully, you know, I don't know how many felt frustrated and saying, oh my God, we're going very conceptual here. You know, how on earth will I be able to put that into practice? How, you know, what's the tangible benefit for it? Anyone? A little?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say a little bit, but I think that's maybe just a cultural thing, that I feel less wanting to share my stuff with people, you know. I'd rather go and, you know, follow the tracks and get to the point, get to a solution, find a purpose, all of that good stuff.
Mm-hmm. And Edward, can I ask now, having gone through that, any thoughts or any benefits you saw from maybe?
Yeah, I mean, the whole process of thinking about it and thinking around the subject, I think, was really helpful. I still do feel that sort of interaction, if you have a conversation with somebody at a party, for example, you go through a series of questions and interest in the person, trying to find common ground and connections. And I think that in itself is, you know, it is empathetic to an extent. And, you know, maybe there is, you hopefully, or maybe both have an end goal of friendship or whatever it might be, to enjoy yourself and, you know, be able to expand on those connections through that conversation. And, you know, I think that the story that Tim mentioned earlier about the farmer, and he, you know, that there was an outcome, and, you know, that was great. And though I suppose maybe the route to that outcome might have been because you talked about stuff around the subject, I think ultimately you weren't just standing in a field for the fun of it, right? You know, you were there to realize whatever it was that you were to realize, but there was a realization that was wanted. So, you know, just
Edward, just following up on that, completely agree with you. I think, of course, I think it's about balance. I think too much of the time we begin the conversations with already everything we want to know back here. And that's why I really love the example here about you guys actually creating some mechanisms with clients where you're already doing that. You're finding other ways. I think it's just about our natural impetus as human beings is to go into this dialectic mode where we want to resolve things quickly. And how much do we lose by not spending a little bit of time in the dialogic? So within any context, how do you allow yourself to not immediately jump in, to not immediately resolve it? I love that phrase from the Waze, the guy who founded Waze, who always says, you know, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And I think increasingly that's one of our challenges. And, you know, a lot of us, we do want to go straight for solutions and resolving things. And how much do we lose if we're not doing a little bit of the other at the same time? So it's not one or the other, but it's just trying to find a better balance.
Yeah.
So I'm aware of time. And so what I would love for us to do just in the last 5 minutes as we close down this session is to share in one word or a tweet, not a Facebook post, just what is it that you need to do to tap into that dialogic side with your clients? So what is the one thing you can do tomorrow or today if you have a conversation with a client? To be able to do that, to be able to listen to your clients.
Hazel, can I jump in here? Just check as well in preparation for the session with Lauren. We also needed to we have to have a minute as well to ask for the question. They need to.
Yeah, we
that's calculated in. Okay, sorry, I
yes. No, it's fine. It's part of the tasks. Yes, no worries. After the session. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead and just checking out with, what is the one thing you need to do differently in order to listen more would be the question.
I think for me, it's to go in without a solution, actually go in open-minded and listening to what their challenges are rather than answering the question before they've necessarily asked it. It's also trying to convince our clients to be more open-minded as well, because I feel sometimes they're quite closed in themselves.
Thank you.
I love that thought that Tim just mentioned about falling in love with the problem, not the solution. I think, in our business, we often, the problem doesn't seem to matter. We always have a solution, which is now is M1. To every single problem, and the answer is M1. So I think if we need to get back to really understanding what our clients are actually talking about, and having an open mind about what that solution actually is, and we can only do that by really understanding what they're talking about. I like the idea of unstructured conversations, so just chatting. Really, that's always good. Just picking up on the little things that the client, it's often what they don't say as well. Like the things that are kind of reading between the lines and picking up on those and going without an agenda is a really important thing.
Thank you.
For me, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, for me it was how you set a path for discovery. You may not have an end solution, or you don't need to throw it on the table from the beginning. Set the path for discovery. It's the first time I hear of serendipity in a business context, and I'm really happy to start exploring how we can not set a solution on the table from the start, but look at different ways to explore it.
Thank you.
For me, it may sound quite simple, but relax. Sometimes I am going to meetings, I'm so stressed that I just want to get things done quickly, and I just need to enjoy.
Yeah.
So true.
For me, I would say that it will be to catch the client in the appropriate context, because I think it might be pretty uneasy to do it in a big meeting with many people involved, and to put the lead client in an uncomfortable situation. So probably to catch him during a lunch or something like that to ignite this kind of relationship.
Very true. Context is everything.
Yeah, I'll jump on that one. So be a bit more human, and if you are passing, drop in for a coffee. It's unstructured. You can chill out, have a chat about stuff, and maybe even don't discuss work. Carry on.
Love it.
I think for me, similar. A bit less conference calls and more FaceTime would be very, very helpful.
For me, it would be to stop being task and output driven when I go into a meeting or talk with people.
Thank you.
And one comment from me, because the challenge for me is to convince the client to secure more time for us at the meeting. So clients are very occupied, has little time and they use the time only for statuses, and that might be the obstacle to talk more openly.
Thank you.
Yes, for me also is to find the right moment to ask the how can we help question.
Nice.
I think mine's really specific, but I think for me, I'll often go into meetings without or thinking I haven't got an agenda. But quite quickly, when things naturally come up in a meeting, my thought process is M1, like you kind of touched upon. So for me, it's if I think that what I'm doing is providing a solution, just write it down. Don't say it. Come back to it at a later date with the client where relevant.
Yeah. I'm going to make the link with that first module about leadership. Remember when I shared the aggregate that we're so good at ambitious and responsible leadership and less so at agile and pioneering. Based on today's sessions, we shouldn't be really surprised, but we hear options, practical tips on how we could kind of strengthen that lever as well to make us more rounded. So we are effective in every situation coming our way and not kind of directed through our preferred modes of leading, acting.
Thank you. Thank you so much for today. Is that everyone? Ariela, I think you're the only one quiet. Do you want to go or do you want us to wrap up?
Something you wouldn't realize. No, everyone pretty much said everything that I agree with. I would say it's finding more time with the client to brainstorm on the bigger challenges and not just getting through like our agenda of everything that we need to kind of sync on.
Wonderful. All right, I'm aware of time and I want to make sure that you guys get back to your busy days. Thank you so much for participating. As we said at the beginning, we have Lauren Walker joining us next time. Thank you, Tim, for linking us to this part of the important part of leading clients. And
Hazel, can I just say one small thing very quickly?
Yes.
It's just a quote I love, comes from the 80s from a woman called Margaret Wheatley. She says, "The biggest change comes from the smallest conversations between people who care."
Lovely. With that, we close. Don't forget the challenges that you wrote down today, because we're going to use them for Lauren's session. So I'll be pinging you guys to get those challenges on Slack. All right. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week and see you next time. See you on Slack. Do your test.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Hazel. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tim.